you can be an individual contributor to a certain extent who's a very good writer or very knowledgeable at SEO, but that kind of has an upper cap on how much you can contribute, right? If you're just a proficient thinker or maker, and to scale yourself to like the leadership level or just be sort of extra valuable to your company, you need to become a very good project manager.
Hey, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Content Briefly. Today we've got fan favorite Eric Doty back for a second time. We talk about all the many things that have happened over the last 13, 14 months since he was first on this podcast, including Doc's evolution from PLG to sales-led, or at least hybrid. There's a lot of interesting stuff there. We talked about Eric's own journey as a content marketer. We talked about some of the freelance and consulting work that he's been up to. And we talk about his role at Superpath, which has sort of evolved from power user to now community manager. Just a quick shout out to Eric. He's just been so wonderful to work with. I so enjoy being in the community as he runs it. I love getting the newsletters that he writes. It's just been wonderful. And Eric's just been a great partner and advocate, Superpath, for a very long time. So thanks very much for all of those things, Eric. I think, as always, great episode. Eric is really one of the smartest content marketers that I have ever come across. There's a lot of rich detail in this episode. As always, I enjoyed it, and I hope you do too. Take care. Hey everybody, Jimmy from Superpath here today with Eric Doty for a round two. He was episode number 3, which feels like a very long time ago at this point. We talked mostly in that episode, Eric, about kind of your role as a one-man show at Doc. Obviously, we're going to get caught up on that. You've also been running the Superpath community for a while now, so we're going to talk about that. Doc has launched a podcast. There's like all these things that I always say, like, oh, we should do another episode to like see how it went. Well, this is that. So before we get into all that, for people who don't know you, Eric, or maybe didn't listen to the first episode, which you should, could you introduce yourself?
How dare you?
Yeah. Tell us who you are. How did you get here? And then give us the rundown of Doc too. Like who, what's the product? Who's it for?
Yeah. So I'll give you the half version that I gave last time. Just go back and listen to the episode. It was surprisingly good, I have to say. But yeah. So I'm Eric Doty. I'm the content lead at Doc. I think most people know me as like a one-person content team. I've been a one-person team at 3 SaaS companies in a row. So I think it's kind of my niche now. And Doc is shared customer workspaces that are most often used for sales or onboarding. So think of it as like a personalized microsite between a company and their customer. And you can embed content, you can make checklists, you can sign contracts, you can do all kinds of things that make sales and onboarding really helpful, especially for companies with long sales cycles or very complicated onboarding processes. So, if you have to onboard an entire company into your SaaS product. So that's the super quick rundown. I guess that's probably all you need to know.
Cool. Yeah. We're a customer.
That's it. That's the end of the episode.
Yeah. Thanks. We'll see you for round 3 next year. Yeah. Episode 100. Let's just quickly talk about you, actually. There's a lot of Doc stuff I want to ask you about, but there's been a few interesting professional things in your own world that I would love to catch up on. One is you've been running Superpath community, so I'd love to chat about that. I actually just got the Superpath newsletter this morning, which you wrote, which I love reading now. It's a lot more fun to read than to write. Yeah. You also, I can't believe I'm going to say this, you went on a LinkedIn personal branding journey. And I would really like to know what the results of that were. Was it fun? Did you meet people? Did you make money? Like what happened, because you posted a lot of really interesting stuff and you got a ton of engagement. And then also like we'll get to the part where like Doc has changed, your content strategy has changed, the team, I want to get into all that, but maybe first, so you helped me when I was out on paternity leave with the community, and now you're still doing it. Like what's it like? Is it a good gig?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, to be completely honest, one of the reasons I was excited about it is you get to interface with whatever it is, 18,000, 20,000 content marketers on a regular basis. And I figured it couldn't hurt to be in front of all these people, sort of selfish reasons of just putting my name out there, but also just being connected to folks to be able to ask questions. Like I think earlier on in my career, I super under indexed on the importance of a strong network. And I mean, remote changed all of that too. Before I was just in small town in Canada and didn't really expect to meet lots of content marketers. And then being, everyone knows the remote world stuff. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I got so much out of the community. This isn't meant to be like an ad for Superpath, but I got so much out of the community when, for the last few years, I think especially when I was in the solo, role thing. You and I have talked about a bunch of times where I don't have peers within my company. So it was extremely helpful to have people say, this is a new scenario I've never encountered. Can you guys help me out? And that made Superpath incredibly invaluable to me. And I think my salary is probably double what it was 5 years ago, and found all these great freelancing opportunities. Like through you, I actually got connected to Doc through Superpath. So giving back is like a cheesy thing to say because like you are also paying me for it. But I think like there's so much value in the community, and it's kind of a role I like to take of like instigator of conversations online. And so that's been really fun.
For sure. It's funny because you were kind of almost doing this anyways. Like when I look at the analytics, like you're the number 2 most active person in the group's history behind me, which makes sense because I've like been doing it for almost 5 years now.
Yeah.
And, but it's so interesting to observe the group from a different perspective. Like sometimes I get to just be a participant, not the person in charge. And it's great. I'm having so much fun, like just talking about content and not stressing as much about like, is this thing in the wrong channel? Hey, there's no link swaps here and stuff like that.
Yeah. Like it does, suck sometimes to have to play policeman, but it does ultimately. I've been in communities, and I'm in other Slack communities that are totally unregulated. What? And it's not content marketing communities. I promise. Sorry. Yeah, they get completely unruly once you don't, be a mean moderator. And so,
for sure.
Yeah.
This is not kind of, we're going off in a different direction, but I feel that the reason the Superpath community is still relevant because there are a million Slack communities, and you pick one. There's a new one every day basically if you want to join it. The reason that it still exists and that I think and hope it's still relevant is that we've just taken it really seriously for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And like that stuff tends to peter out, and then the communities slowly die off. So anyways, you've been an amazing contributor to the community. Now you're an amazing manager of it. So thank you for all of that.
And I know nothing about running a community, so you hired a horrible person. There's whole communities about running communities. I'm like, nah, I've got this. I'm sure I'll take my way through it. But I guess another, like, just going back to your LinkedIn question too, we might as well segue there.
Yeah.
I think I used to have, we talked about this last time, I had a super active Twitter account where I did like sports humor and like hockey humor. And the downfall of Twitter also sort of coincided with me deciding that I should get off that website. And I sort of had this realization of I can take all the like silly humor posting, being kind of self-deprecating, and port that over to LinkedIn and in some ways Superpath. But I think LinkedIn is so, I mean, everyone knows what LinkedIn is like, and the, cringe posts and things like that. And I see discussions all the time like, oh, why is LinkedIn content so boring? And the only reason it's so boring is because people make it boring. You're allowed to post interesting stuff on LinkedIn and nobody
right.
will get mad at you. And in fact, people will like it. And I think people are sort of turning the corner now on that. But around a year ago or so, I did the whole, I'm going to post every day challenge thing. And I was kind of shocked at how transformative that was.
Yeah. Tell me about that, because the posts were really good. Like you were sharing really good stuff. And I don't know if this was necessarily intentional. I feel like you became like the automation guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like you were sharing a lot about Airtable and automation and efficiency and things like that, among other things too. But
that was kind of an accident. I think my strategy from the beginning was that I felt that most LinkedIn posts are too advicey, and I guess I answer people's questions in Superpath, but I don't feel like I'm great at giving advice, but I feel like I'm doing so many jobs as a one-person team that I can show what I'm working on. And I think just openly showing what you're working on and like building in public in a way is super valuable, because it's like, oh, here's a thing I figured out today that saved me time. And over the course of trying to think of what do I post every single day, that's where I got into the automation stuff, because I realized sort of engagement levels were higher when I showed things I was doing. And so, I dabbled in talking about freelance writers and things like that, but then you just get 1,000 freelance writers DMing you, which is fine, but it wasn't necessarily like my target audience. So then I got more into talking about automation, because I think I sort of like fumbled my way forward into finding a niche through posting every day. And I actually hate posting every day, and I don't do it anymore, but it was really useful to like quickly build an audience, figure out what I have to say that's unique, and then just sort of lean into that. So now it's more so when I have something interesting to post, I do it. But it was really, it created a ton of inbound opportunities for me all year long. People just messaged me saying, sometimes it was job offers that I wasn't interested in, but sometimes it was like, hey, can you coach me on how to be more efficient? Can you give us, we're creating a content product that has to do with automation. Can we pay you to give us product feedback? We're doing our website messaging. We're doing, we're writing cold outreach that has to do with automation. So suddenly everyone who's trying to target marketers with my interests started coming to me inbound with all kinds of like ad hoc requests. And so I filled my limited free time that I had for freelancing all year with just odd jobs. And that was pretty, I don't know, it was crazy. It was really interesting for me, but it wasn't like the right way to scale a freelance business, but it was really fun.
Maybe it is. It sounds like it worked really well, but you posted, I think it was the end of 2023, about how you had basically moved on from freelance writing. You wanted to make some extra cash on the side, and you had kind of posted a list of all the various things you had done to trade your knowledge for money. And it wasn't that it was random, but it was just like so many different things, as opposed to just, I wrote one freelance article per week for 52 weeks. It sounded more interesting also.
Yeah. And part of it was by design. I mean, I've talked a lot about this with my boss or CEO at Doc, Alex, is that I don't want to use the same sort of brain energy on freelancing as I would for my full-time job. Because, I do have to sit down and write blogs and edit blogs. And on the side, I want to flex a different muscle. So, managing a community, or just giving someone one-on-one coaching, or, I do SEO for my friend's mortgage company. Like, why not? Like it's just different muscles to flex. Some people do their own side projects, and this is like, I might as well get paid for all these side projects. And it's just sort of a continuing education, as long as I don't get sort of like pigeonholed into one thing.
Yeah. I feel like you really nailed the topics, because there's a world where you did like the too advicey stuff, like, it's my 35th birthday, so here's 35 things I learned. And it's like, enjoy the journey.
It's actually my 35th birthday next week. So
is it really? Are you going to do a post like that?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Inspired by Jimmy. Yeah.
Please you promise me you won't say like the journey is the destination or something like that. But then you also didn't do the thing where you just like talk kind of in broad strokes about some professional thing. Like I do see this a lot on LinkedIn, where people are like, the thing that's wrong with content marketing, or like some kind of like extremely generalized trend they've noticed. It's like, you just said, hey, here's some stuff I'm doing. If you want to see it, it's here. If you don't want to, it's okay also.
Yeah. And it also helps you when you go out to try to teach somebody something. It helps you sort of refine your own knowledge of it. So when I'm posting an automation or something like that, I kind of have to tidy it up and make it look nice and work properly. Yeah, and that actually is super beneficial to me in the long term to have kind of like an inventory of stuff I know and have it tied in a nice little bow.
Yeah, that's cool. Actually, I'm feeling like a little burst of inspiration. I should post some stuff on LinkedIn, because I always have this guilt that I don't, and I feel like I should. Well, you see, like I see people like Dave Gerhardt. He posts on LinkedIn constantly about how like LinkedIn is basically his top of funnel for driving people to exit 5, his community. I literally just saw this morning Cassie Naji, who's now the CEO of Campfire, saying that they've doubled their pipeline for the agency, and they can attribute it directly to her LinkedIn post. Like, dang, I probably shouldn't be ignoring, like if people are saying like this is working and it's free, I should probably do that.
Yeah, you probably should. I think you can really stand out by not doing what other people are doing on LinkedIn. And there's so much the same. There's so much talk to your customers, high quality content always wins, like all these kinds of platitudes that it's much easier than you think. Just sort of like open your toolbox, open your desktop, and like, what are you working on today? And what are 3 tips you can share from that thing?
Yeah.
And just get super practical and hands-on. And that's how I've gone about it.
Cool. I love it. Well, we'll look forward to your 35 tips for your 35th birthday post next week.
Yeah, I'll dedicate it to you.
But let's talk some Doc stuff, because you've done a lot of really cool work at Doc. And so just to kind of set the context for people, when we spoke last, go listen to that episode, one-man show, you were investing in this kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone style of content, meaning like, you're sharing genuine subject matter expertise, you're optimizing it for a keyword because why not? You're going really hard at that. And you had said like, we're going to tackle more channels, but I got to get this one up and running first so that I can do that. Well, now you've done that. At least with the podcast, maybe other things. You also, I think, have done quite a bit of product marketing work. So anyways, there's a lot here. Where do you think is the best place to start? Like, how can you just like maybe give us an overview of what's happened in the last year-ish since we've done this?
Yeah, for sure. Maybe let's start with the blog, because that's where we kind of left off last time. And so I'm one of those people that I could just live in like blog SEO world forever until I die and get like pigeonholed as one of those people. And so it was I was sort of challenged from the outset by Alex, CEO, saying, I need you to like be able to do this many blogs a month, but then I also need you to add a bunch of other channels. And therefore, like, we have to compress the amount of time it takes to do the blogs, and we have to get used to like hitting publish and, when it's not perfect and things like that. So I really spent the first 3 to 6 months at Doc just super optimizing that process. So I went really, you and I have talked before, I went really deep on writing an onboarding guide for freelancers. I made sure I automated all the emails that go for our assignments that go out. Here's a blog you've been assigned, or it's been published. Please look at it for me. Please share it on LinkedIn if you can, and just try to automate as many of those touch points as possible. I automate sharing it internally with our team. Here's a new blog, check it out. And so that was kind of step one. And then really, like you alluded to, the next big project was the podcast, which has been a labor of love. I mean, you have a podcast, you know how much work it is. I think we were surprised how much work it is. And the painful part of a podcast is you kind of have to do it for years for it to become a thing and catch on. And so that's been a huge, like, there's the launch process, which is a whole thing. And then there's the ongoing sort of weekly tasks associated with that. So I'm happy to get into that if you want, or whatever you think is interesting there.
Yeah. Well, regarding the podcast, there's kind of 2 main things I want to know. One is, how does it, if and how does it interact with the rest of the content? Are they 2 totally separate things? Like, or are they kind of the topics for each and the guests kind of planned deliberately? Like, what's the interplay there? And then 2, like, what's your role in the podcast? Because I think podcasting is a skill that it's not one of those things. It's not like writing. Like, if you're a content marketer, the skills needed to do a good podcast may not already be in your toolbox, so to speak. That was definitely my experience. Part of the reason I found the podcast to be harder than I thought is because I thought it'd be more like content marketing. And there's a lot of things that are really different about it. So I know there's 2 sort of big questions, but podcast and content, and then like your role in it.
Yeah. Let's start about how we think about the podcast. So when we conceptualized the show, we really wanted it to be like a how I built this for revenue teams. And we wanted to tell the stories of successful revenue leaders out of like a past company of theirs, which I think is a little different. Most people come on, they promote their, like I'm doing now. I talk about Doc. I talk about what I'm doing at Doc. We wanted to have like the head of revenue at Loom talk about like how Loom went viral. We want to have the former head of sales at Facebook talk about how Facebook launched its sort of sales arm. And that's been our concept for the show. It sometimes deviates a little bit from that. Sometimes there's an interesting person that Alex knows who can speak really deep on like sales enablement or something like that. That's a topic that relates to Doc. So we've had a mix of those stories with topics just relating to our audience, which is revenue leaders, so sales, marketing, customer success, growth, etc. And I think like Alex has really taken, he's the host, and so he's really taken like the research journalism jobs on. So he invites the guests, he does all the research, and we talked about whether that's the best use of his time. I don't know if you found this, but preparing for the interview yourself versus me like building a list of questions for Alex, it really makes the show that much better. Like he watches 4 podcast appearances that the guest has been on and, researches the company and really goes deep. And then once the conversation's happening, it's quite natural to have a good interview.
Absolutely. It would be very easy to just ask someone the same questions they've been asked by a couple other podcast hosts.
Yeah. And then the content doesn't end up that interesting. And then, so how does why are we doing a podcast and how does it relate to our content strategy? So one, going back to that 2 birds with 1 stone mentality, is that we're trying to do thought leadership-y things in our blogs that are kind of SEO first, but we try to inject them with, real opinions, interesting fact, quotes from smart people, like a lot of people are doing these days. And the podcast, because the people are all in our ICP and they're just naturally touching on all the topics that we want to talk about. And so now, as we've had 30-ish guests so far, we have 30 hours of interviews with really smart people that pretty much any topic we write, I can go into our podcast transcript and find 10 interesting things to pull from. So on like just the really basic, for pure content's sake, that is a super great play for us to get sort of subject matter expertise without freelance writers having to go and do that themselves.
Yes. Oh, can we zoom in on that for a second?
Yeah.
Can you tell me like very specifically how this works? Like, you're writing a content brief. You know that a podcast guest touched on something related to this. So you go into Rev or wherever you get your podcast transcripts from. Do you pull that out for the writer, or do you kind of make the library of transcripts available to writers and say like, hey, don't go Googling for random quotes on this. Like, just go get them here?
Yeah. So this has evolved over time. At first, I would just light bulb will go off as a guest was speaking and say, this is related to this post. Write a note to myself. When you write the brief, remember to link that. And so for the first 10, 15 episodes, I kind of just had a personal encyclopedic knowledge of everything that was said and would just drop it in the brief as we were writing it. But over time, now that we're getting into the 30 plus guests and that's getting unwieldy, one kind of crazy thing we've done now is, I'm jumping ahead, but after we've published the episode, we publish a bunch of clips we do shorts on YouTube, we do TikToks, we do sort of more just horizontal 5-minute YouTube videos. And then what we've started to do is upload them all back to our website. And so we have like a full video library of all these clips. And so now I can actually just, when we're writing a blog, I could sort of Control F our site or go to Google and do a site search for the keyword or whatever, like, sales leadership. And then it'll bring up all the transcripts on Google from our own website of all the times someone's talked about sales leadership. And then we'll also pull up video clips because they're all indexed on Google now. Most of them are indexed. So
that's
we
good.
have this. Yeah,
that's really good.
like,
so there's a transcript. So if you post like a 5-minute clip on the website, that has a transcript.
Yeah, actually, we just have the transcript on the original episode. We don't have the transcript on the clip, but also we've sort of SEO optimized the titles of all the clips, so it can be, any kind of interesting thing can be found there, and that works super well. And so we thought that might be an interesting SEO play as well, just super long tail, like Notion community strategy or Notion's content strategy, things like that. And the jury's still out on whether that is doing anything. But it's incredibly useful just to be able to feed our content strategy. And I'll say one more thing about that. Also, if you go to our blog, we'll give you the link. We've intermingled all those video clips with our blog posts.
Ooh,
and so when you land there, you see not just like, SEO optimized blog titles in a long list and it's lame. You're kind of hit with this, we called it's like a New York Times style, like bunch of thumbnails down the side, bunch of articles, bunch of video clips, and it feels more, it makes us feel bigger than we are in terms of, our marketing versus our company size. But it just gives us this experience of, wow, these people are like, they understand me. They're talking about the things I care about. And so that's just kind of a pure like brand impression strategy that I think is powerful and something more people should do.
I completely agree. I don't think there's anything better than people's names and faces on your website. Like it stands in such contrast to like a SaaS website with a bunch of text and stock photos and copy that says stuff like collaborate, save time and money, or whatever, totally. Value proposition people are throwing out there. So I love that.
Yeah. When you think of when you're an early stage company, the actual customer logos you can get on your site sort of pale in comparison to the customer logos you can interview. And I mean, we're like we have Loom as a customer, so that's like we can have their logo in both places.
That's real deal,
but to get someone from Notion and Loom and Facebook and all these very well-known companies on our podcast, that then you can use that. I think, was it Rand Fishkin called it like permissionless co-marketing? I think it was a great term, right? But you just like put yourself next to another brand and be like, look, we're friends. And that's what we're doing, right?
That's great. That's a lot of work too, though, right? I mean, especially like I'm putting it like,
not when you're an automation wizard.
Okay. Yes. That's the thing though. Like to do the podcast, I find that pulling the podcast clips takes forever. Like to go find like the 30 to 60 second thing that I want to share. Like that takes, if you want to do that 5 times, it's even harder. And then like get them on the right platforms, write the copy for those, but then also to bring it back to your website. I'm sure you have to do some like custom stuff on your CMS to like make it all look like you want it to look. And I mean, have you automated most of that away?
Most of it. Yes. So while the episode's happening, I have the liberty of not being the host. So I sit there and I sort of mentally flag. I take furious notes while the conversation's happening and can normally pick the quotes with sort of 90% accuracy while the interview is happening. So I'm sitting in on all the episodes.
Got it. So you're like the producer sort of.
But I'm in the background and I'm just yelling at people and their camera isn't pointed at the right direction or whatever. And so I'm able to flag those, but then I have a freelancer helping with a lot of the sort of menial tasks around an episode. But we're using that Opus Clip AI tool, which basically we can upload our whole episode and it identifies like what it thinks are interesting moments from the show. So we're able to pull a bunch of clips that way. But then we also manually, through our podcast agency, make a couple clips. And that's sort of like the high value. We're going to post those on our founders page. And then we go and blast YouTube shorts with like 10 clips from every episode. And some of them pop off, which is great. I mean, pop off is like a few hundred views. We don't really have any followers, but they just get picked up by the algorithm and go. And so we've been able to grow our subscribers on YouTube primarily through the reels, or the shorts, which is interesting.
This is like a world I just don't know anything about. This is very interesting.
How much neither, are you, to be honest? Yeah.
Well, how do you feel that it's worth it, and how are you measuring it, if at all?
Yeah. Is it worth it? I think so. I think YouTube SEO is an untapped thing for B2B, especially. I think people are just starting to think about it. And so we always say, let's try to zig when other people zag. And that's what we're trying to do is let's figure out YouTube. Is it worth it? I think all the reasons that we already talked about of how it also feeds into our other content. Like now I have those videos uploaded and I can put them in a blog post, and that just gives a different impression than whatever, a quote from a writer or from a SME. And then the other thing we didn't really talk about too is we use it's wrong to say like sneaky sales play, but like you talk to the people on your podcast who would be ideal customers of Doc someday, or they match the ICP, so their network are ideal Doc customers. And so that has just been super valuable. You multiply number of guests times their audience, and they like and share your post. That has to be worth it, right? For an hour, maybe 2 hours of work per episode, especially when there's limited ways to get your name out there.
Yeah.
And so
definitely.
But yeah, that huge long tail of work. So I've automated a lot of it with Airtable. So we kind of just have a grid like, surprise. So we have a grid where, here's the episode, here's all the clips associated with it, upload the video in there, and it goes through some series of zaps that ends up on YouTube. And we try to automate as much of those little uploading steps. There is like a publish to YouTube zap. And so
that is
if
pretty slick.
you can go from database to YouTube fairly easily. And then, haven't done anything that fancy with AI yet though, but Airtable does have AI fields now where you could, like, for example, upload the transcript of the clip and then get it to write something about it, is something I've been thinking about.
Right. Just kind of a side note to this conversation is, I feel that the skill set of the content marketer is really changing. And I feel like you're very representative of that. Automation is huge, but automation is not just kind of dreaming up, efficiencies. It's like learning how to use these tools and like really making it happen, which there's a few different levels of. There's like, we can send our email subscribers to this thing, but then there's like building out complete workflows like you described. Sometimes it's really hard, but it's like some of what you described is like probably not possible or maybe not worth it unless you are going to automate it. And then another that I would cite is multimedia. Content marketers are now like you just can't rely solely on text any longer. You just can't do it. So like you got to learn the tools, you got to learn the mediums, you got to learn how to appeal to people on these platforms. And like, I frankly feel a little intimidated by all of that stuff myself, but like to kind of hack it as a content marketer, to be honest. Yeah. But you're doing it, like you're, I would imagine, learning a ton as you do all these things.
Yeah. And I think if there's a lesson for people to take away is that
this is a LinkedIn post right here.
Yeah, exactly. Here we go. I need a catchy tagline, but no, the lesson to take away is that I wasn't doing any of this stuff like maybe a year and a half ago. I sort of saw, I was at a company called Butter, and I saw one of our product managers doing all this like Slack to Notion automations and things like that. And that's when it kind of clicked for me that you can be an individual contributor to a certain extent who's a very good writer or very knowledgeable at SEO, but that kind of has an upper cap on how much you can contribute, right? If you're just a proficient like thinker or maker, and to scale yourself to like the leadership level or just be sort of extra valuable to your company, you need to become a very good project manager. You need to be, you talk about this all the time, you need to be really good at vendor management and working with freelancers and contractors and agencies. And then the thing that I've really leaned into as a one-person team is this automation stuff, because it's a necessity. Like if I were just sitting down and writing 8 blog posts a month, Doc would grow, but it would grow at a much slower speed. And you're sort of like at a startup that's in this seed stage where we're just trying to get heard out there. You kind of have to be in like constant, like, where can we find efficiencies? Where can we be bigger than we are? And for me, automation was something that I leaned super heavy into. And yeah, I mean, like I took computer science in university, that helped, but just a little bit. And so it was just, you have to lean into your personal strengths too.
Yeah. Super cool. Just a little teaser. We're going to re-release the Superpath marketplace soon. And for years it's been, Airtable and Zapier and kind of me behind the scenes, trying to make it look kind of more legit than it actually is. But I've built an app, which is not quite ready to be released, but it's using no-code tools that you can log in. It's fully branded. You would never know a real developer didn't make it. Like, my point basically has been like, these tools are insane. Like the fact that I can't code, but can make an app and sell access to it is wild. Anyways, if that's inspiration for people who maybe need a little kick in the butt.
I'm inspired.
Yes. So like,
me.
Get going on some of this automation stuff because it's super cool. I wanted to ask you too about, are you still a one-person marketing team?
Yes. Like in-house. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you have contractors and
Yeah. So like this person I mentioned who's helped me with the podcast, she spends, I think, 10 hours a week working on that. So that's pretty significant. I have a sort of an old buddy who I just send all kinds of random odd jobs to, like, can you upload this blog to Webflow, or can you, he's sort of a generalist. How can you write the FAQ for all these product pages? Like, he's just sort of a generalist hours bucket. And so in-house, yes, I'm a team of one. I mean, Alex, our CEO, is a marketer as well. So he takes a significant chunk on his plate of, writing some LinkedIn posts, or he does all the product launch videos. He'll record himself going through the product, which, takes a lot off my plate. But still a team of one.
Okay, cool. And the rest of the team has changed. You were telling me a little bit before we started recording that there's a sales team, customer support or customer success. And I'm curious how does that change what you do on a day-to-day basis? Because if I remember correctly, there weren't sales and customer success last time we talked. So I imagine at the very least you guys are communicating about, here's what I'm doing, here's what you're doing. Like, is there some synergy here, or is it, has it developed into something more kind of deliberate than that?
Yeah. So when I joined Doc, we hired an AE on the same day. So we had one sales rep sort of taking away the founder-led sale thing away from Alex, and building out a sales motion. And one thing we learned in the past year is that Doc ended up a lot more of a top-down sell, more sales-led than product-led. And so in the last few months, we hired a head of sales and then another AE. They always say you should have two sales reps, because it was like a Jason Lemkin thing. You should have two sales reps because they have to compete with each other. And,
That's such a sales thing.
Like, yeah. And you have to learn like what's like an individual's, failings versus a product failing. Anyway, but it's been transformative for us to have a head of sales and two reps. But what's really changed for us on the marketing side is that we used to only answer to ourselves. Alex and I could put our heads together and say, this seems like a smart thing to do. I love SEO. Do you love SEO? Yes. Let's make blogs. And then 2 years from now, let's look and see if any of this worked. Right. But when you have a sales team, that's completely unsatisfying to go to a sales leader and they're like, like, what are you working on all day? And they're like, I did outbound to 1,000 people. What did you do? Like, oh, I wrote a blog. Right. So you really have to change how you report on content, how you sort of communicate internally about it. And one thing that's been new to me, just to be totally transparent, is sitting on like pipeline meetings. I've worked with sales teams before, but it was more of the sort of service. They tell me I need this asset, or like, make a sales deck for me, and I would go and do that. This is way more. We're sitting in a go-to-market team meeting and saying, here's the pipeline that's been created this month. Marketing inbound has created this much, sales outbound has created this much, and we're looking at those numbers. And when you see your number and it's not, they're growing the outbound faster than we're growing the inbound, suddenly it sort of, it lights a fire under you a little more on, I can't just be patient and do the usual SEO thing I've been doing. I have to go like more outside the box, or do the more like growth hacky, urgent things on top of that. And so there's new internal accountability there. So like we have to be accountable for our numbers, and that's even the CEO has to go to our head of sales and say, our marketing initiatives are doing this for our pipeline, which is interesting. And so that's caused us to look at our content strategy too and say, should we keep making 8 blog posts a month, or now is it the time to like focus on backlinks and sponsoring communities and partnerships and influencers, and what other things can we add on top of this mix to move the needle quicker? And I don't normally all that doesn't fall under a content person, but I'm the only marketer. So I guess the other side of that is my role is sort of broadening more into a generalist marketer.
Yeah, that's interesting. If you ever want to start a business, you're building all the right skills to do it. That's just another side note. But like the more generalist you are, actually, the better suited you are to be an entrepreneur one day, if that ends up being what you want to do. I am curious though, like, okay, you look at the sales pipeline generated, you look at the marketing pipeline generated. Have you made any significant changes to content strategy based on working with sales?
Yeah, one thing that we sort of shifted gears on was we're like, okay, it's great that we have 200 blogs and a certain percentage of them are getting traffic, but we really want these 10 blogs to get traffic. there are these 5 product pages to do better in the rankings. And I think having that internal accountability made me like, now I just have a list of those 5 pages and those 10 blogs, and I look specifically at their traffic and their rankings and like building backlinks to those pages, for example, which it was easier before to just say, oh, look, this blog that's not that relevant is pulling up our site traffic and the line's going up, and therefore great, you can live a little more in like fantasy land. Whereas being accountable to the sales team for, great, that blog has traffic, but is it, the classic, like, is it resulting in sales? It's true. And it has, having to look at that number every week and look people in the face and report on it has really made a difference there.
Yeah. Super interesting. How about the PLG sales thing? Like, I certainly think of Doc as like product-led growth. Has your and the company's view changed on that as you've built up a sales team?
Yeah. So I think one side of that is we kind of made a conscious decision to move up market once the product got better. So we were able to support larger sales teams. The teams also that were really having the trouble that Doc sort of solved were bigger teams. So, they have 10 sales reps, they have a long sales cycle, and the leader really wants to help their reps all follow the same process, do the same follow-up, can make things easier for their buyer. And they had to kind of be bigger teams for that to happen. And therefore it's harder to do like pure product-led growth into like a sales leader with a 15, 20 person team. Our contracts got bigger, which is great. But from a content perspective, it didn't change that much because we can still, you can still get a lead by getting someone into the product, and you can still post on LinkedIn and try to get the attention of sales leaders. One thing that it shifted our content a little bit to like case studies, for example. We're in lots of sales conversations and really needed strong case studies. And so, you and I have talked about our case study process before in the Superpath community thing, but that's something I'm constantly doing. Like we have 6 or 7 or 8, which is kind of a lot for a company of our size, but we keep building more. So that's been a big thing, and things like messaging, putting messaging documentation together for our sales team, putting together like sort of the ROI case for Doc. We wrote a blog on that. How Doc consolidates a bunch of other tool stacks. Like we've kind of had to do the bottom funnel sort of sales objections that our team typically faces and write content for that and give that to them. And sometimes they don't even use the blog we wrote. They just like, we go through the exercise of that argument and then put it in their hands. And then they're better equipped for those conversations once they come up. That's
a great point. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to plug Superpath Pro, where you've done a couple of workshops for us. People can get access to those. The one thing you had mentioned on the last time we talked on this podcast was Doc was like PLG, and you were primarily selling to smaller companies because they're more open to trying new tools. So I think that's actually a very interesting development that Doc's product has become more mature. You have a better understanding of who needs it and a better understanding of how you're going to get it to them too. It's just like an interesting, companies evolve, like you got to evolve with it.
Yeah. And part of our strategy has been intentional, that we really focus on SEO because you can write the blogs and you can get the traffic and the product can change versus if we were super heavily promoting the product or something, or going out into the world and really putting it in front of people, spending our budget on getting like ads, getting in front of people right now. We sort of took the slow, deliberate approach because once we'd have the traffic, the product would be ready for it. And now we feel much more comfortable with product fit. Like we have reporting built in and we have a whole content management system, and it's just better suited for larger teams. And so that really enabled us to like, now we can go, we sort of have been talking about this as like our coming out tour this year. Like Nice. We're going to splash Doc everywhere because now it can handle it. And yeah.
That's great. Well, we will genuinely have to circle back in a year or so and hear how it went. Did you roll out new channels? How's it going with sales? Are there like 15 salespeople now? Are you still a team of 1, or do you have like, a massive team working under you? I'd be so curious to know like how all of this stuff develops. Yeah. And in the meantime, where can we point people? I mean, obviously your LinkedIn, the Doc podcast, Grow and Tell might be another good place to point people. Anywhere else?
Yeah. Follow me on LinkedIn. I keep teasing that I'm going to put a course together on automation, kind of automation 101 for content marketers. And maybe by the time this podcast is out, who knows, I will still be teasing it, but maybe it'll exist. And so, definitely follow me on LinkedIn. Listen to Grow and Tell. It's a really cool podcast because it's talking to all the revenue leaders, not just marketers. And so you get a sense of, how does a sales team run? How does a customer success team run? And I think it's a great way to sort of scale your skill set and knowledge as a marketer who tends to interface with those teams. Yeah,
it's really good. The branding for the podcast also is very good. It's like retro Saved by the Bell kind of thing. It's really good. I mean, if nothing else, go check out that. And then obviously, if you're in Superpath, you'll see Eric there in the newsletter.
I'm not hard to find.
Yeah. Thanks for taking the time, Eric. Seriously, appreciate it. It's always good to catch up. We actually catch up surprisingly not as often as people might think. We talk in Slack a lot, but we don't often have the chance to do this. So it's good to catch up.
I think most of our conversations are on camera. It's like a weird reality show where people can watch the entire, like The Bachelor, people can see the entirety of our relationship from beginning to end.
That's so funny. Hopefully it ends better than most of the Bachelor relationships do. All right, this is going off in a direction I didn't intend. We will see you next time. Eric, thanks as always.
Thanks so much, Jimmy.
Take care.